Welcome to the Storytellers, the radio show and podcast that features those who choose to leave their mark on the world through the art of story. I'm your host, Grace Sammon. I look forward to our time together today. Now, let's meet our storyteller.
Claire Douglas had worked as a journalist for 15 years, writing features for women's magazines and national newspapers. But she wanted to be a novelist from the time that she was 7, a dream that came true with the publication of her first novel, The Sisters, which won the Marie Claire Debut Novel Award. She lives in Bath, England, with her husband and 2 children, and I'm delighted to welcome you, Claire, to the Storytellers microphone.
Thank you for having me. It's exciting.
Oh, well, thank you. We're very, very excited to have you. How did you know that you wanted to be a novelist? I wouldn't have even known the word novelist at the age of 7. So how did you know?
Because I remember I was in like a classroom and the teacher was talking about books, and she was talking about Enid Blyton, who I always loved when I was a little girl. So she was talking about Enid Blyton and she was saying that she was an author. And I was like, oh, I've never heard that word before. What's an author? And she was like, an author is somebody who writes books and gets paid for writing books. I was like, that's a job. And I was really excited by the thought that that's an actual job. And I knew straight away, I was like, that's the job I want. I want that job. Because I loved writing stories, even when I was really young. So I just knew, as soon as I knew there was a job called an author, I wanted to be it.
That's fabulous. And you started out doing rom-com, is that correct?
Yes. So I started out as a journalist, and then I decided I was trying to write. I really liked like comedy, like authors like Marianne Keyes. So I wanted to write like a sort of comedy drama. But then, so I did that for a couple of books, and they never got published, and they got sent back, and I got some encouraging, comments, but most of the time they were like, no. So then I saw there was a competition, and I was already writing a rom-com, but then I was thinking, oh, maybe I had this other idea, and I thought maybe I should go for that idea because it's a bit darker. And then I did, and then I had these 2 books, and I was like, what should I do? Should I submit the one I've been working on for years, this sort of rom-com, or should I go for it and go for this sort of thrillery? So I sent the thrillery one, and I'm really glad I did. Because I think if I sent the rom-com, I wouldn't be talking to you now, probably.
Well, we're very glad you did too. And you went from that to now having 7 standalone novels, an 8th one coming out next year, in 20 languages.
Yes, I know. That's amazing. I still find that so fascinating to have books in like countries where I can't speak the language. And it's just to think that my books were translated into different languages is, I still find that like, wow. So weird.
As do I. You are regularly, and you and I've just met, but you are regularly described as delightful, upbeat, funny. It is direct antithesis of what you now write.
I know.
So where does that darkness come from, Claire?
It's really odd because I've met a lot of crime writers over the last few years, and they're all like that. They're all sort of quite happy, quite fun. And it's like, I reckon the thing is we must get all our angst out on the page. So that's probably why we're like nice in real life, because all our dark sides come out in the page. So we could be nice in real life because we've already got rid of all our dark thoughts in a book. So I wonder if that's why. I don't know. It's strange, isn't it? But yeah, I think it is quite like therapeutic to write thrillers.
Oh, I'm sure it is. But do you have a dark side?
Well, I never thought I did, but I must have I don't know. Like, I think I have a dark imagination, and I think that gets put down on the page. But I think I am a bit of a, what's the word for it? Catastrophic person. Is that when somebody is always catastrophizing?
Catastrophic?
That's it.
Catastrophizing.
Yeah, always,
catastrophizing.
Yes. I can't say it. Yeah, catastrophizing. When I'm always thinking of the worst thing that can happen. I am a bit like that. Like, if we're walking down the road and I've got my son who's only 12, I'm thinking, oh, make sure he walks on the inside because a car might come and it might mount the pavement and he might get knocked. So I'm always thinking like that. Okay. So I think that's probably my dark side, like the sort of anxious worries underneath.
Why do you think as a people, we are so drawn to thrillers, and especially here in the United States right now, it's getting to be Halloween time. So
Yeah.
there's all the
Yeah.
scary movies coming out. Why do you think we're so drawn to them?
Yeah. Well, I know I'm drawn to them because I sort of feel like I'm in my cozy house and it's all nice and warm and I'm reading like these horrible dark things that could happen, but you sort of feel quite safe that they're not going to happen, if that makes sense. So you're sort of reading them and it's exciting because it's a bit scary, but you know that you're not really in any danger. So I don't know if that's the sort of lure of them. It's exciting and you sort of almost think, oh gosh, that could happen to me, but it hasn't. So it's quite nice and I can just sit back and read it. And like when you're watching a scary film, it's like, for me, the scarier films are the ones where they're a bit more close to home, whereas things that you're reading that are a little bit, you sort of think, well, yes, it could happen, but it's not going to, do you know what I
Not
mean?
gonna happen to me.
It's not going to happen to me.
You have a theme in several of your books, which is really about vanishing people, missing, disappearing. Is that through? I haven't read all of them, but I've read some of
Yeah.
them. Is that a constant for you?
I think most of them have got some element of that in. I think a couple of number 9 is more, probably not so much about that, but yeah, the one that's just come out in the UK, which is The Girls Who Disappear, that's coming out in America in January. That's obviously about 3 girls who disappear. But yeah, I think it's because I think that's probably one of my worst fears, but also like it's quite fascinating because there's so many different ways that someone could disappear and there's so many different ways that what could happen to them. So they might not be dead necessarily. They could have just started a new life, or there's so many possibilities, I think. And I think that's what makes it quite interesting. Like, no 2 story is the same. There's also disappearing sort of stories, but they're all quite different because there's lots of different scenarios that you can come up with, I think, for disappearances.
Which book would you like to tell us about first?
Well, the one that's out at the moment where you are is The Couple at Number 9. So maybe that one. So that one, which is probably, yes, that one has probably been my favourite to write, I think, out of all of the books, because it's sort of about it's about a mother, her daughter, and like a granddaughter. So it's like sort of 3 generations of women. So I think it's quite. I quite like that, like writing from different perspectives, like a grandmother, then the mother, and then the daughter.
So you have the 3 points of view in there.
Yes. But the grandmother's in her home when she's got dementia. I've sort of had to tell her story through fragmented memories, and she's sort of having conversations, and you're sort of trying to piece together whether it's relevant to the story. Obviously, it is relevant, but as you're sort of reading her bits, it's like she's got this big secret that her granddaughter's trying to find out what it is about these 2 bodies buried in the cottage that she used to own. And the granddaughter's found these bodies when she's doing a renovation. So she's trying to go to the nursing home and ask her grandmother, what happened. But the grandmother is obviously can't remember everything, or so she says, and it's like she's got to try and piece together the truth about what really happened 30 years ago in the cottage. So that was really fun to write. I really enjoyed writing that.
Was it fun to write because of the points of view, or did you like tell us, what were the parts of it that made it fun?
Yeah, I think I like the points of view. I like the fact that there was a grandmother who has got her own backstory. And so I had like a backstory going back to 1980, which is when she lived in the house. And then I've got like her daughter, who is like a 40-year-old mother. And then you've got Safi, who is the granddaughter. So she's like 20 and she's young and she's pregnant. And, she's quite naive. And so it's really fun writing the different characters and the different points of view because they're all very different, but they all add to the story. That each voice is important to finding out what happens. So that was.
So even though it's dark, you're still having fun.
Yes. Yeah, it was good because it's like it was like a puzzle. Like, it was fun to because it's like a mystery. It's more of a mystery, I suppose, than a scary thriller. It's more of a what happened. So that was really good. That was really fun to write because I quite like a puzzle. It was quite fun when you're the author as well. Like the ending, and but you want to write it in a way that you're sort of putting it in little pieces for the reader to sort of guess a bit, and then maybe not guess enough. So you're sort of like teasing them. It's quite fun to write that.
Do you always know the end?
Yes, yeah, I do. I always know the end. I think I'd find it really hard to write the book if I didn't know the end, just because I think I'd find it hard to know where to put the beats of the story and the reveals if I didn't know how it ended. So I need to know the ending. Yeah.
So it sounds like you're an outliner.
Yeah, but it's weird because I'm not like one of those real planners, like you have the planners and the pantsers. But I have a very loose outline, so I know the twist, I know the ending, and but I don't really know how to get from A to B necessarily. I don't have it all like planned out, but I need to know like where the twist comes, like what the twist is, and the ending, and who's responsible for everything that's going on, sort of thing. The baddie.
I'm fascinated by that because I always know the end of my stories, and I know the beginning. I don't know the middle, and sometimes the twists are a surprise even to me. Does that ever happen to you?
Yeah, I have the big twist. I always know, but then there's like little twists that come up, and I'm like, oh, that's because it's interesting. Then, isn't it? It makes it more fun when you're writing because you're like, oh, anything can sort of happen. So I have like a loose sort of like outline, but lots can change. And it's very rarely that the baddie changes. It's normally always this. I think there's only once where I wrote it and then I changed my mind about who the perpetrator was going to be, but that's only happened once. Most of the time I know, yeah.
And you talk about the beats. Is that something you study and you know where a reader needs to have that?
I think I sort of like just by reading a lot of books myself, like a lot of thrillers, you sort of get like you sort of know, don't you? Like you sort of think, right, okay, something's got to happen now. So there's got to be a bit of a reveal. Otherwise, it's going to get a bit boring. There needs to keep being something new, being fed. Otherwise, it just you sort of don't want it to sort of plod along. So I think I didn't not that I plan them out, but I try to, as I'm writing it, try to think where if I was reading this book now, where would I expect there to be a reveal or something exciting happening. And I always find, I don't know about you, but I always find the middle bit of a book is the bit that you have to sort of work hard on, because that could be the bit where you might lose the reader. It might be a bit boring, or
Yeah,
so
there's that sense of rushing to the end. Should I just rush to the end? But no, we need, yes, I agree with you. What's your new book that's coming out in the United States next year?
Oh, yeah, so that's The Girls Who Disappeared, and that's the one that does come out here in the UK. And that's the one where it's about three. It starts off with 4 girls in the car, like teenagers, and there's a driver, and then she's got her 3 friends in the back. She's driving home after a night out. They've been to like a nightclub, and it's dark, and they're driving on this sort of haunted, like sort of infamously haunted road. And then as they're driving down it, she sees a figure in the road, and she swerves and she crashes, and she blacks out. When she wakes up, her 3 friends have disappeared. And then it's like 25 years later, a journalist comes to the town to make a podcast, and she starts to realize that the town don't want her there, and that they're hiding something about what happened that night. So, and then Olivia, who is the character who was driving the car and who crashed the car, the journalist needs to find out if Jenna's the journalist, she needs to find out if Olivia knows more than she's letting on about what really happened that night. So, yeah.
Sounds fascinating. What I'm drawn to, Claire, in your writing is, first of all, the plots are, if not perfectly thought out from beginning to end, they're exquisite. They really is. You can see the plot unfolding in a way I don't always see in other people's novels. So you do a beautiful job with plot details. Oh, you're welcome. But you also beautifully accomplish some very tactile sensations for someone. As a reader, I read the story, and I forgive me for not remembering which of your books, but the young woman goes to get interviewed for a job.
Oh, yeah.
And she's standing there feeling all great in her brand new suit. And you do such a great job of describing in just a sentence or two that, it's her brand new suit. She's feeling great about it, but anybody else would kind of be looking at it as, oh, she just got that in a very inexpensive store. And I flashed back to myself of, remembering my first job being all very excited that I had my very first suit and thinking, I looked great and it was polyester and I'm sure I looked horrible. So where do you both draw that ability to make it tactile, but also build character there? Because when you did that, you got a whole sense of a class system. You didn't know who was standing at the door prior to that.
Yeah.
but you had that in an instant.
Oh, like you said, I remember how I felt as well, like, for the first day, and you're young, and like you said, you can't afford a nice suit, so you bought this suit and you're quite proud of it, but then you realise that actually it's quite cheap. But I wanted to convey, because Una in that book, she is like a working class girl, and she hasn't got much money, and she goes to this big house to get a job with this rich lady. And I wanted to show that sort of like class sort of separation between Una and then Elsbeth, who is like the old lady who's looking for someone to be her companion. So I wanted that juxtaposition of class, which I find really fascinating, because even though they say here in Britain there's no class system, there sort of still is. There's still like a snobbery sometimes. There's still a bit of judgmental. If you're not wearing the right clothes, especially like in like older people in that class system. Like, so Elsbeth is supposed to be like a very sort of upper class older lady, so she would be looking at Una's suit and she would be judging from where she got that from. So I wanted to I find that really interesting, so that's why I've decided to put that in the book.
Well, you do a good job. Not only are you in different languages, but you also have audiobooks, print books. How do you feel as an author about both?
Yeah, it's funny, because I always liked, like, I love reading a print, like a proper print book, like a paperback, or hardback. But actually, as I've got older, I do notice I do read more ebooks. I think it's because it's easy, isn't it? It's like I can just, when I'm in bed, I can just read it on my phone. I haven't got to get a book and it's heavy. So I think there is a place for both. I can sort of see why sometimes it's easier to have an ebook or an audiobook. Like, my friend tells me she listens to books when she's doing the cleaning on audio. So I thought that's actually quite good, because you sort of feel like you're doing something useful, but you're also reading at the same time, so you don't feel quite so guilty about it. So I think it's nice that the books come in different formats.
Have you listened to your own books in audio?
No, I haven't actually. I've listened to that, like, you get like a little clip. If you look on Amazon or somewhere, you get a little clip that, and I listened to the little clip, but I'm not an Audible member, so I need to do that, because I would like to listen to more audiobooks, I think, especially like if you're walking or
yeah. I would like to I always like to ask authors who do have audiobooks how different it is to have somebody else's voice read your words.
yes
Because for me, it's very clear in my head. My voice is in my head when it gets onto the page, and I imagine that's true for you as well.
Yes, yeah, it is strange. My one of my friends, when she read my book, she said she could hear me almost, because she knows me. But then my other friend who listens to audiobooks, she really likes the audio. I think it sort of takes away from it, because she knows me. So it must be quite weird if you know the author, mustn't it? And then you're reading their book and you're hearing them. But yes, because I haven't listened to that many myself, and I talk quite fast, and they're always much slower and more considered, and they're reading. So yeah,
That does strike me with the audiobooks, the measured pace of
yes,
the reader. It's
yeah.
very
It always seems
fascinating.
quite slow, doesn't it? It always seems.
It
I'm like,
seems
come
very
on.
slow. It seems very
Yeah,
slow. But that's such an art form to be able
it is.
to
Yeah,
do that.
yeah, it's brilliant. They're amazing.
What do you think makes a great story? You've got soon to be 8 books out. Do you have a formula? Do you rip things from the headlines? What makes for a great story?
Yeah, I think something that's relatable to people, even though it might not have happened to them, they can put themselves in the character's shoes. So I think for me, the character has to be quite strong. I think if it's a strong character, then I think you will follow that character wherever they go. So I think if you've got the characters right, then I think that the plot is. I mean, obviously, it still needs to be plotty, and you still need to have things happening. But I think for me, I think if I really relate to the character, or I'm just interested in the character, that will make me want to carry on reading a book. So that's what I try to do. I mean, sometimes it's hard, isn't it? Because you don't want to start a book too slow by having too much character information, but you want the readers to like or have some empathy for a character before embarking on the story, because you hope that that's what's going to keep them turning the pages and interested in the character in some way. Yeah.
Fascinating. Tell us something. Well, first of all, tell us how people can find you. And then if you have a minute, tell us something quirky about you that we might not know if we were just Googling you.
Oh, okay. So I'm on like Twitter and Instagram as Dougie Clare on Twitter, and Instagram is Claire Douglas author, and Facebook. And the quirky thing is, weirdly, I can tie a cherry stalk in my mouth with just my tongue and tie it into a knot. Which I only realised at a dinner party once we were all trying to do it, and only me and another woman could do it, and no one else could. And we were like, I was like, oh, I've got a little talent.
What gave you the inspiration to do that?
I know. Someone was at the table and they were saying, oh, can you do this? And a lot of people were trying to do it. They were like, no. And I could. And I was like, I can do it. I can do it. Right.
Well, you're very talented, both as an author and as a cherry stem knot tire. Claire, thank you for being with us on the Storytellers today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
This has been a copyrighted episode of The Storytellers by Authors on the Air, Global Radio Network, and Grace Sammon. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
That concludes this episode of The Storytellers. I'm so glad you could be part of the story today. I hope you share the stories, tell your own, and come back for another episode. Because when our stories are told, everything changes. I'm Grace Sammon.